Hey everyone, my name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to episode number 70 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. Today, we're thrilled to have Paige Carlotti on as a guest. Paige graduated from Villa Maria Academy in 2011 and is currently the head of marketing for North America at Faden International, a global specialist recruitment firm. She is based in New York City. She graduated magna cum laude with a degree in journalism from the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University in 2015, and in 2023, Paige earned her MBA from Columbia University. Prior to her current position, Paige worked on the marketing teams at Brooks Brothers and Untuckit, and on the editorial team at Men's Health magazine. In addition, she has contributed to Forbes, USA Today, and Women's Health magazine, among others. How cool. What a journey. Welcome, Paige.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And 2011, that's a good year to graduate from Prepper Villa, huh?
Yes.
I jokingly, of course, say that with me having graduate from prep in 2011, and then obviously you were 2011 from Villa, so we have a lot
Yep.
of similar friend groups and knew each other from back in the day.
Yep.
And it's great to see the stuff you're doing in your career. Congrats to you on all the success.
Oh, thanks, Jimmy. You as well.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's good to connect. I know one of our previous guests were on the podcast, Rosa Agnello, had a really good episode that we released back in July or August. She was the one who kind of connected us again to say you were out there doing some great stuff and you make a great guest for the podcast. So shout out to Rosa for bringing us together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just another example of the connections you make at Villa because her and I went to high school together and she lives in New York. I live in New York. We're still friends. I'm in her wedding this summer. So yeah, that's a little taste of what we'll talk about.
Yeah, how cool. It's great. And those are some of the things I value about our Prep Villa community are those connections and how we're all staying connected nowadays and that network, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Well, yeah, we'll dive into this a little bit. I'm excited to talk to you today. We're gonna reflect a little bit about your time at Villa, and then we'll jump into talking more about your career. Obviously, talking in your bio, you've done some really great work, so I'm excited to get into that a little bit later. But to
Thanks.
kind of even start the podcast off talking about, you were mentioning, your time at Villa, and that's kind of where those connections with Rosa and I'm sure early on started. But for you, Paige, when you were, seventh, eighth grader, starting to look at high schools. What was that decision process like for you, and why did you decide to attend Villa Maria Academy?
Yeah, so I think like most people, I had a lot of influence from my parents. And I think a lot of people, their parents influenced them because, they went there and my dad did go to prep. My mom's from Meadville, so she went to Meadville High School. So my parents had a lot of influence on my decision to go to Villa, not just because my dad went there, but also because they really wanted me to learn about my faith. And that's something that now that I'm an adult, technically, which sounds weird to say, is really true. I remember my mom saying that she wanted us to learn about our faith because as you get older, you're scared, you don't know where to turn, you have your faith, and that's not something that's in every curriculum. And I can attest to that too. Now, as an adult, I've learned there's really not that much that separates people. The more you progress in your career and in life, a lot of people, like we all by this point, have kind of learned a lot of the same things. But what really differentiates you and kind of can determine not just your success, but your happiness in life is the values that you have. And Villa really was the best for that, especially in Erie. So I'm so grateful that they influenced me to do that because it's true. I We'll talk about it more later, but I went to a really competitive business school and I went to school with a lot of people who went to these high schools that are tens of thousands of dollars in New York and that kind of thing. But and I didn't do that, obviously, but we ended up at the same place. So
Mm,
it's not so much about the academics. And while the academics are great at Villa, there's so much more to your education at that age that I think is really important.
mm. Those are good things to kind of mention there, and I would agree that faith aspect being the most important out of all of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Life is hard as you get older, and I'm really grateful that I have that foundation in my life because it's definitely been helpful.
Putting you on the spot a bit, but do you know
It's
what year
okay.
your dad graduated from prep?
He is, I need to do math really quick. I believe he was 1978.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
That class calls them the Great 78 because there's so many of them that they infamously they go around, and when we do alumni events, they call themselves the Great 78.
I'll ask him if he knows that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's included in that.
That's funny.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, I'm wrong. It's 1973. I'm off by 5 years. My mom was 78. My dad's 1973.
Okay, so your dad was
So I was like, this is not
1973.
familiar.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I also know many people from 73 and they consider themselves great as well. So
Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
but that's really fun. And a lot of the synergies between the prep and villa community with, whether someone's mom went to villa, their dad went to prep, and then they have, a son or daughter and they sent them to prep or villa too because of the values they saw.
Hmm.
That's why all these years later, our schools really coming together. We first kind of corporately merged when you and I were students and
Yep.
we're on separate campuses. That was kind of the first step in the process to where we are today. But those synergies that we had for all those years prior now culminated us being under one roof, which has been great. But I agree that value component is something that we all share as part of the reasons why we're passionate about prep and villa and those different components.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, Now, when you were a student, were there certain things that really made your villa, experience stand out, like either memories or traditions or things that you guys did there when you were a student?
Yeah, there's a lot at Villa. The first one that comes to mind is the sports teams. I had so much fun. I was on, and then I was eventually the captain of the golf team. Same with the swim team. It was so much fun, and what I really liked was getting to get close with people not in your class. So there, obviously, I think everyone knows. At least maybe it's different now since we've merged. But when I was at Villa, our class was about 78 people, which is very small. So it was nice having those opportunities to bond with people in other classes. I remember when I was a freshman and the girls 2 years above us, we were all really close. And I'm still friends with a lot of them to this day. There's one girl who lives here, who I'm still close with, and we know each other from the swim team. And then when I was a junior, there's a freshman class that came in that we became really close with, and I still talk to a lot of them to this day too. So definitely having that community within your community was a lot of fun. And I was really involved in student council too. I know it's a little nerdy. I was my senior year, I was the president of it, and that was just another place to get to know people in other classes and maybe that you wouldn't otherwise meet in your day to day. And all of those different activities really laid a foundation for me. The importance of mentorship and having a network, which has gone on to then be just a common theme throughout my entire career. And that was kind of my first experience with that, especially mentors, like female mentorship.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, having a smaller class like that, it's nice that it sounds like you were very engaged with the school. I mean, you
Yeah.
bought into the
I was
sports,
all
the
in.
academics, yeah, the student council. That's awesome, though. And I mean, those are some of the things that really help shape your experience, and
Yeah.
obviously those relationships you formed through those times. You look back on, I'm sure, with very fond memories, as you said.
Yeah, and I think too, it's also a lesson in kind of you get out what you put in. You know, I didn't really think of it that way. I was bought in. I was all in on the Villa mission. But I had an awesome experience, and I think it was because I was so involved and engaged. And I think that's a good thing for people to remember. And these positive experiences aren't just going to be handed to you. You know, you have to get out there and try.
That's a great point too.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
if there's any current students listening, that's what I would, definitely sound some advice to them. I look back
Hmm.
on my time and wish I was a little bit more involved. I played sports and I did those different things, but I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have did this or done that. You're only in high school
Yeah,
for 4 years, it's a
right.
short amount of time.
It goes
When you're in
quick.
high school, it feels like forever, but
Absolutely. Looking back, it goes by so
yeah.
quickly.
And so that kind of addresses, some of the friendships and kids that were there when you were there. What about teachers? Were there any teachers who really played a big role during your time at Villa?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure that anyone who has been on this podcast within 10 years of me graduating would probably say Mrs. Walker. I'm sure you've heard that one before. She
Yeah.
was our English teacher. And to this day, even I from undergrad and my grad school experience, she still stands out as one of the most influential teachers in my life. She really took pride in helping us make the most of our abilities. She really spent time on developing us. And most importantly and most memorable about her, she had very high standards. And if she had not had such high academic standards, I don't know that I would have gotten into the college that I got into, that then helped me get the career I had, that then helped me get into the grad school. So she really was kind of my first touch point in uh, the importance of working hard and having that foundation in my life. She really forced me to be my best. One
Yeah.
example specifically that stands out is, so she was, as I said, I was really involved in student council. I was on the executive board junior and senior year, and she made it a requirement that this is embarrassing, but we had to go to leadership camp. It sounds so nerdy and whatever. And of course, people would complain and say, like, that's not fair. Like, you shouldn't, like, I have this and that in the summer. I shouldn't have to do this in order to run. But she did not budge on that. So I went to leadership camp twice, not once, but twice.
Wow.
And or I should say, I will tell you, in nearly any interview I had for colleges or anything like that or jobs, that was the one thing they asked me about. They asked about my like leadership camp experience. They asked about that, what I learned there, why that was important. So I think Mrs. Walker being so firm in her standards really laid a strong foundation for me and my own work ethic and my own standards for myself.
Wow, that's really cool. I've heard about Mrs. Walker, but to hear that personal experience that you've had with her, it's kind of like how I start the podcast off every episode saying, Cathedral Prep, the standard of excellence. I mean, that's what our history is between Villa and
Yes,
Prep, is that standard of excellence, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. You're jumping into the next question I had for you too about how Villa helped prepare you, for your life and career. I guess that's one component right there, right? Is those leadership camps.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know the camp specifically. Also, they weren't called leadership camp, but that was what we called them because we're like, I don't even know how, whatever. But no, it absolutely is because of all of the leadership opportunities that Villa provided. Villa was a really good fit for me specifically. I'm kind of, I don't know if it comes across on the podcast, but I'm a little more on the shy and reserved side. But because Villa was so small and we had a really good community, I was comfortable raising my hand to do things that I wouldn't have probably otherwise done. Villa really made me not afraid of failure, which I think is the single most important attitude I've had in my life throughout my career. Um, like I know everyone with Villa talks about, the great sisterhood you have and everything, and that's really true. And that helped me to step up and do things that I had no experience doing. But then eventually, because I tried, I found that I was good at it, I enjoyed it, and it worked out. So absolutely, the leadership opportunities that Villa provided are what helped prepare me for my life and career.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, such a transformational time as those 4 years. And as a
Yeah.
kid, you kind of make of it what you can, and you're going to get out of it what you do. Obviously, you going all in and doing the opportunities. I would never guess that you were a shy kid back then. Just, you
Yeah.
being director of marketing, all the different things you've done, you're kind of out there already, right?
Yeah, I can turn it on when I need to. Don't worry about that.
But behind closed doors, you just want to be snuggled
Yeah,
up and just hanging
yeah.
out.
Leave me alone. Do not
I think we
disturb.
can all feel that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. No, I appreciate
Yeah.
you kind of reflecting with us a little bit about Villa and the impact that it had for you and your career and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I guess, I read the bio, but maybe fill us in a little bit about your professional journey. Tell us a little bit about, how you end up pursuing this field and the role you're in today.
Sure. So I graduated from Syracuse University with a degree in magazine journalism and a minor in health and wellness. And even 10 years ago, finding a job in magazines was really hard.
Yeah.
It's very niche. And even then, like the publishing industry was kind of struggling. So I actually was really fortunate and ended up finding a job about 6 weeks after graduation at Men's Health Magazine. It's the largest men's magazine in the world, or at least it was at the time. And it was exactly what I wanted to be doing. It was journalism and it was focused on health and wellness. So I was super excited. And how I got that job was one of my professors at Syracuse was friends with the managing editor at Men's Health at the time, and he had reached out to her asking if she had any students who might be a fit for this. So that is just another lesson in, having a good relationship with everyone around you, not just your peers, not just the people who can help you, but your teachers. There's always people around who can help you. You never know where your next opportunity might come from. So aside from it being the right thing to do, being nice to everyone and living out your values, it really can pay off in tangible ways as well. So that's how I got my first job. And at Men's Health, I came in as a junior producer. So that means that I was responsible for helping with all things on the website. And I took that job knowing that then I would eventually be on the editor track, which means I would then be writing stories, editing stories for online and digital. And that was my dream job. So I was very excited about that. And Men's Health was my first job. And what I learned there is something that then continued to be a theme throughout my career. And it was being the importance of being a self-starter in the workplace. And again, that lesson of not being afraid to fail. So about a year into working there, our social media editor had left. And this is like 2016. And social media wasn't exactly new, but it was still foreign to a lot of people. And so when she left, everyone just kind of looked at me because I was the youngest and assumed I understood social media. And of course, I had my own social profiles, but that is very different from running it at a brand. So they asked me if I could help out. And I said, yeah, of course. Yeah, why not? I can do that. Even though, again, I had absolutely no experience with this, but I stepped up and did something that I was very uncomfortable doing. And it ended up paying off. So I worked in social media at Men's Health, and then I ended up moving on to doing social media at Brooks Brothers. And another reason why I wanted to get into social media is because I had the thought that, every company these days now needs a social media person. They need a social media presence, but not every company needs a journalist. So I kind of saw that too as a way to expand my skill set and, kind of open the door to more opportunities for myself. So that's why I decided then to kind of move more away from editing and more into social media. And I knew that writing was something I could always do on the side as well. And I did do that for a while. Even when I worked at Brooks Brothers Untucked, I would freelance for different publications like Equinox's publication, Women's Health, that sort of thing. So eventually then I moved, as I said, I moved on to Brooks Brothers. And that is when I moved to New York City. I know Men's Health, you probably assume it's in New York, it's the biggest magazine. It is not. It is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So that is
Wow.
actually, I know, fun fact. They did have an office in New York, but that was like the fashion and the creative side. But the editorial team was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, specifically Emmaus. So I lived I lived there for 2.5 years. All of my friends were in New York, but anyways, I ended up moving into social media, and then that is what got me to New York at Brooks Brothers. I moved there. I enjoyed working in retail. I wasn't there a long time because then I was recruited to go work at a company called Untuckit. Some people might be familiar with it. It is a men's fashion startup. The tagline is "Shirts designed to be worn untucked." They kind of came up with that boom of all these other D2Cs like Warby Parker, Allbirds, all that. So I worked there, and it was funny when I was recruited, the recruiter told me that the hiring manager had also worked at Men's Health. And it turned out we worked together at Men's Health, and he didn't even know that I was being interviewed and whatever. So then he helped me get this job. He was, rooting for me because he knew I had done a good job at Men's Health and respected me from there. And then that is ultimately what brought me to Untuckit. I worked there for 5 years. I worked under the hiring manager, Dan. We had a great relationship. We still do. And that's another lesson in just you never know who's going to come up later in your career. So aside from it being the right thing to do, you should always, do your best, be nice to people because you never know how it can help you.
Right.
Yeah, and I think also too, it's a lesson in it's never career paths are never linear. There's always some weird route you take, and I'm definitely an example of that. So at Untuckit, I did social media, and then again comes that lesson, that theme of being a self-starter, not being afraid of failure. I found that I wasn't enjoying social media as much. I wasn't super challenged at a certain point. Social media is just one marketing channel, but I had found that I had become interested in understanding how all of the marketing channels work together, not just that one that one channel. I much prefer being more of a generalist as opposed to being hyper focused and a specialist. So Untuckit being a startup, it was an environment where you could just raise your hand and say, hey, I want to do this, and you can go run off and do it. So I essentially created my own job of marketing manager there. I created my own job description, goals, KPIs, that kind of thing. And I worked as a marketing manager for a while. And I enjoyed that a lot. But again, I wanted to be more challenged. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I wanted more. And our CMO at the time, who is a mentor to me, she really had a super big impact on my career. She encouraged me to go to business school. I had never considered that. I was one of those people who, I graduated college and I said, nope, I am done. That's it. Like, I can't imagine studying another day. Like, that's crazy. I can't imagine sitting in a classroom. But she encouraged me to apply to business school because it my college major was magazine journalism. That's super specific. I had never taken a class in finance, accounting, economics, any of that. And I really did start to feel that gap sort of. The more I was progressing in my career, I wanted to have that foundation in business management and all of that. So she encouraged me to apply to business school. And again, another example of having a positive female mentor in my life. So I decided to apply to a few places, one of them being Columbia Business School, and that obviously was a reach. I was like, it's not going to happen, but I might as well try. And also, the founders of the company Untuckit that I worked at, they had gone to Columbia Business School, and that's actually where they met and how they started the company. So that was that was kind of an advertisement for the school. That I was like, oh, that's really cool. It really, and neither of them went to the school thinking that they would start this company. So it was really exciting to me thinking about all the possibilities and the doors that could open if I were to go somewhere like that. So I did end up getting into Columbia, which was amazing. And I did their executive MBA program. So that means I went while working full time. And that was the most stressful time of my entire life. I worked a full-time job, and then on Saturdays, I went to school from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. every Saturday for 2 years. And that is how I got my MBA. And while it was hard, it has been the single most rewarding thing I've done throughout my career. And I'm so grateful to the female mentor in my life who encouraged me to go to business school. And she had
Wow.
gone to. She didn't go to Columbia. She went to Northwestern, but just having someone in your life who's been through similar things and believes in you and kind of helps, open these doors for you. Things opens doors that you didn't even know existed, I would say. Um, so then I graduated from Columbia in 2023, so not too long ago. And then shortly thereafter, I took the job that I'm currently at, and that's Faden International, as you mentioned in your intro. It's a global specialist talent company. We're a global recruitment firm. In non-marketing speak, we hire for companies. Our headquarters are London, our US headquarters are New York, and that is where I am based. And I serve as the head of marketing for all of North America.
Wow. There's so many lessons in that journey through your career. I mean, that I could just rattle them off between the mentorship aspect. I mean, honestly, like those are important lessons that, us as listeners can learn from your journey about the mentorship aspect. I mean, you could have been very close-minded and not been open to, coaching or,
Hmm.
feedback from somebody that you respect and just no, 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 I'm doing my thing. I don't envision myself doing this. So that's definitely part of it. Your reputation, obviously, when you're talking about the networking aspect of,
Yeah.
treating people right, like besides it just being the nice thing to do, you carry that personal reputation of your work and who you are
Hmm.
with you everywhere you go. So you don't know what's going to happen 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and who,
Yeah.
that hiring manager being in your path when you worked with him previously. It's like, what are the odds of that happening?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of those different components are really cool, and congratulations, on that hard work to get your
Oh,
MBA
thank
there
you.
from Columbia. 2 years every Saturday. You said 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah, it was very intense.
Wow. Yeah. I just had to say that again so everybody understood. I mean, you were grinding it out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. And so now
Thanks.
with some of the stuff you're doing today, what are some the challenges and the opportunities like in leading the marketing for a global recruitment firm and what you're doing?
Hmm. Sure. So the biggest challenge, but also opportunity, is working with our sales team. Uh, previously my experience had been in D2C marketing. That stands for direct to consumer marketing. So you are marketing directly to an individual who's going to buy your product. This is B2B marketing, and that stands for business to business marketing. So me as a business, I am marketing our services to other businesses. And again, another example of doing something I had never done before. This is very different, and it's a lot more sales driven than say a D2C retail environment. This is very intense. There are a lot of big numbers you have to hit all of the time. A lot of people are stressed. So in order to be successful, you have to really be able to collaborate. So that means that I have to collaborate with our sales team very closely. And with that, there are so many personalities to manage. A note about my company. So Fade International has 6 sub-brands within it, and they're all brands that operate in industries where there's a supply-demand imbalance within talent. So we have our financial sciences and services brand called Selby Jennings. That's the most well-known one. And then we have DSJ Global, which is supply chain. We have EPM Scientific, which is life sciences. We have Glowcoms, which is tech. We have Larson Maddox, which is regulatory and legal. And we have LVI Associates, which is specializes in the energy and infrastructure industry. So there are a lot of salespeople and not a lot of marketing people, a lot of me. So having to manage all of those personalities, all of those interests is very challenging. One of my coworkers once described it as refereeing the puppy bowl, and that really resonated. Having a lot of different interests to manage while I'm making decisions has been a challenge. But then on the flip side, it has truly made me a better person. Like, it has built so much character. Another friend of mine at work described it as rehab for people pleasers, because you learn very quickly in this job you cannot please everybody. You can just do your best with the information that you have, and be nice to people along the way. So while it's been really uncomfortable at times, I feel like I've grown more in this job than I've ever had. It's really been a crash course in accountability, and when you reach a certain level in your career, I've learned I can't say no because, oh, my boss said no. A lot of times, when you're younger, that's the answer. My boss said no, we can do it. Now I have to say, oh, we're not doing this because I'm saying we're not doing this, and having to be responsible for that, it can be scary. And another aspect of working with our sales team, not to generalize, but these people do not take no for an answer, and that's why they're good at what they do.
Right.
But they will chase you until they have an answer from you. You cannot ignore them. They will not forget. I have tried, and they won't. So it's been a really good experience in working with other people and being held accountable and making difficult decisions. So that's certainly what's been the biggest challenges and opportunities in this role, but I love it.
Yeah, no, that sounds very complex and a lot of different moving parts. It's a lot more than what I was even imagining you to say in terms of what you have to do for the company. We're gonna get a little specific to your industry with this question, but it had me
Yeah.
thinking about brand management. You're
Yeah.
talking a lot about collaboration. You're having to work with these salespeople to do that. But on the other side of it, you are the one deciding things. And sometimes when you first get in, I know I've felt this way too sometimes. You get into a position where you're the decision maker. You don't get to hide
Yes.
behind a boss anymore. You don't get to hide behind
Exactly.
the corporate umbrella of
You said that
something being
perfectly.
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. You have to be the one to say yes or no, but it's because of the policies and procedures you've created to identify the brand and your job of what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, so, like I said, kind of get a little bit more specific to brand management. Um, you know, how do you do that? There's so many moving parts. I guess, just feel free to take that question as you want, but how do you manage a brand when there's so many different moving pieces going on within it?
Yeah, it can definitely be, there can be a lot of pressure because in marketing, what you're doing is extremely visible. Everybody sees this. It's going out into the world, like there is no taking it back once it's out there. So there's definitely a lot of pressure that comes with that. But what I have found really interesting working in brand management, especially when I was at places like Men's Health, Brooks Brothers, Untuckit, for these more consumer brands, as like I said, Fade International, B2B, these other ones, D2C, they all had primarily male audiences, and I am not a male. I do not identify as that. I am a woman, so it was interesting having to market to a demographic that was different than myself. That didn't come as easily. So, like as you know, talking to my peers or people who are like me. So it's a really great exercise in the importance of listening to the consumer and understanding who they are and asking yourself if what you are doing is of value to them. That is kind of the north star we follow is, are you adding value to the consumer? Whatever
Mm.
decision you're making within the branding, is this going to make their life easier? Is this of service to them? Or is this just something you're doing for corporate interests or to appease people internally?
Say that
So
again for
that
everybody, because I think sometimes that gets lost. I think honestly sometimes
absolutely.
we get in our own world. I didn't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off, but
No, it's
honestly
fine.
sometimes we get stuck in our own worlds, and we think we know what's best, and we think we know what our customer, for me, our alumni, what we need and
Yeah.
what they need. But in reality, we just need to listen. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that
Exactly.
was such
No,
a
it's
good
good. I'm
point.
glad you're equally as passionate about it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your consumer will tell you what you need to do.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, you've had a great experience and background in so many different, companies, and I loved hearing your story about how you had to pivot at one point to start to
Mhm.
go more into social media. And this was at a time that social media wasn't brand new. You said 2016. It wasn't new, but people's interest level in getting their companies more engaged with social media was more the newer phase of it. It
Mhm.
was a lot more consumer, focused. It was a lot more, becoming less of our generation on it and more of our
Yeah,
parents now getting on it, our
yeah,
grandparents, and
yeah.
expanding to what it is today. But how did those, lessons from your past help you to then dive into the social media world, dive into what you're doing today in marketing, with things like Men's Health and whatnot?
Yeah, I think it was a really good, in social media specifically, again, what you're doing is very visible. Everybody sees it and everybody has an opinion on it. Everybody, thinks they know what is best and everything. So I really learned that social media is how it kind of ties to brand management is that it takes forever to build a brand.
Mm.
It can take an entire someone's career to build out a brand, and it takes about 3 seconds to ruin it. So it forced me to kind of be in the business of thinking about everything that could potentially go wrong. When what you're working on is so visible, you can't really be impulsive, but you still have to act quickly, and that can be tough to balance. So I think having that perspective, understanding how things can be perceived from all sides, all different audiences, I think that really strengthened that habit in me. And as we mentioned, I my degree is in journalism, but now I work in marketing, and it's not totally far off. But what it taught me too is that writing is, I think, the single greatest strength you can have
Mm.
in your career, whether it's marketing, law, even finance. Like you need to know how to write. Communication is everything, and I'm very grateful that I have that strong foundation in writing because I think it is the single greatest skill for anybody to have, regardless of industry.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen that through my career. I can, say as well. Prep helped prepare me. I would say the best
Hmm.
for that. I was not naturally a good writer, and I still don't claim to be a good writer or anything. But through my time at prep, I realized when I was at Slippery Rock and I was at college, how much
Hmm.
further along I was than my peers at the time. Just
Hmm.
that simple skill alone, just what I got from high school, I was already, a level above where everybody else was, and then it just kind of continued to grow from there. And one of the things I'm fascinated with your industry of marketing and social media and
Hmm.
all the different components of that is it's constantly evolving. It's constantly
Yes.
changing.
Yes.
I listen to Gary V
Oh yeah.
podcasts and whatnot, and he's always talking about marketing, and he calls it the TikTokification of social media because
Hmm.
it's social media nowadays. It used to be you accumulate followers, and then those followers will see your posts. So you
Hmm.
continue to grow your followers, they're going to see your posts. But nowadays, it's more focused on interests. So your interests are going to be the things that you actually see on your social media, not just pages you follow. Um,
Hmm.
that's just one example. But my question for you is, how do you stay up with all these trends? How do you stay up with such a world that's constantly evolving, constantly changing? What do you do to continue to keep your edge?
I think talking to people is the most important thing, especially talking to your consumers, bonus points if they're your customer.
Yeah.
Being out in the world, I think, is super important. And this is something that I had a previous, I think it was at a maybe it was at Untuckit. Just the importance of getting up from your desk and not being stuck in your inbox. I am very guilty of that, of just being lost and drowning in my inbox and not picking my head up and seeing what's actually going out in the world. But I've learned that the single most important thing is to talk to people, go out and experience marketing, think about it, and just talk to people about what they're seeing, what they want to see, what works with them, what doesn't. That to me is the most important. And also to your point, you listen to Gary Vee's podcast. I also have a few podcasts that I listen to that kind of keep me up to date on everything, on all the trends. They're constantly evolving. So I try not to be too reactive to everything and see something and think, okay, now we have to do this. I try to kind of lead my team with the principles, which I think number one again is listening to your customers. That's always going to be in fashion. So I try to I have a few principles that I just stick to, and the trends are kind of nice to have.
Mm, that's a good perspective. I really like that. I just wrote it down in my own notes. Lead with
Thanks.
principles, because honestly, it's one of those things where you hear something new and flashy. It's like, oh, we should go do that. And then there's
Exactly.
the next day something else, and you're constantly just in this revolving door of trying to
Yeah.
grow what you're doing because you're
Hmm.
chasing the next trend
Yeah.
versus kind of more or less looking at these trends and say, do they align with our
Hmm.
principles? Do they align with what
Exactly.
our customers want? Do they align with our brand? So
Hmm.
yeah, this is all good stuff. This is stuff that I'm really passionate about learning more about. So that's why
Love
some of these
that.
questions I think are for me, not even just our listeners.
I love it.
Um, so kind of pivot, but on the same tune, what advice would you give to young professionals who are looking to get into this field? Maybe some are out of college and kind of young in this workplace already, or maybe some are in school and they're listening to this episode and they want to know how to get to where you're at in your career. What advice would you give them?
I would tell them to take advantage of every opportunity that comes their way. Be willing to take a chance, take a risk. Don't be afraid to look stupid. You are going to look stupid. Like we always, you're never going to look cool all the time. So don't be afraid to do something that you've never done before. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but even I was actually going to talk about my internships in college, but even before that, in high school, I took advantage of every opportunity to write. I think even when I was in high school, I participated. The Erie Times had a program called Fresh Ink, I think. So I wrote for them. I also helped out at Lake Erie Lifestyle magazine. And I don't even think there was like a job post or anything. I just kind of reached out to them and was like, hey, I'm interested in learning more about this. Is there anything I can do to help? And then those experiences, again, helped me get into the college I got into. And then when I was at Syracuse, I interned at Red Book magazine. I don't know if they're still around, but they're owned by Hearst. They were kind of like the Cosmo for kind of an older generation, the generation above who would read Cosmo. And then I interned at Forbes magazine, and then I also interned at USA Today. And then while I was at Syracuse, I was involved in a ton of different extracurricular activities. We had a lot of on-campus magazines. I was the editor-in-chief of a magazine called What the Health. So I think just taking advantage of every opportunity that comes your way, but not even that comes your way. You also can create your own. Like I said, some of the things I did didn't exist. I just asked if I could do it and they let me. So
Right.
that would be my advice. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for advice either. Seek out mentors whenever you can. I think experience is the best teacher, and it's even better when it comes from other people, when it didn't have to be your own experience. Like learn from other people learning the hard way. So that would be my advice for people looking to get into this industry.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a very entrepreneurial spirit to you
Hmm.
where you're willing to take on initiatives. You are always constantly thinking about how to further, what you're doing or yourself and your skills and whatnot. It's definitely a skill, I would say, because not everybody has that,
Yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit to go out there and do that. earlier in the podcast, and it's funny to hear you talking about all this stuff. You mentioned you were shy and you're not really
Yeah.
inclined to be this person. But I don't know. Time and time again, you're talking through this episode, and I have to doubt you on that because you continue to show how you're not this
Thank
shy
you.
person. You stay back. But
I
but I
appreciate
guess
that.
on that same kind of point though, so if you kind of think of yourself as a shy person, right? And I'm sure a lot of us
Yeah.
who are listening to the episode can relate. We'd rather be reserved and kind of not put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
What made you put yourself out there? I mean, even back to high school, you reaching out to people to do these publications and start writing and doing that. Um, Even though you were shy and reserved, what got you over that hump?
That's a really good question. I think I was more afraid of failing and not going after what I wanted than looking stupid. And I think
Mm,
that was really important. I was more afraid of not getting what I wanted than looking silly or being told no.
mm, that's really good. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah, just that perspective of thinking of your life as if I don't overcome this fear of,
Yeah.
of being shy, reserved, then I'm not going to have the life I want. And so that
Yeah.
was the motivation you needed to keep going or to do those things. And yeah, I can certainly relate to that as well. And it's something where, for our listeners on this episode, just reflecting on the own things that have set you back, held you back a little bit from taking that step. And it's okay if you're not in a position, you can take the step now, but looking back and saying,
Hmm.
what held me back from the last opportunity I said no to, or why did I do that? And just kind
Exactly.
of growing from those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know too. I mean, I'm not even sure if shy is the right word, but it just putting myself out there doesn't come really naturally to me. And I just want people to know it doesn't have to, and don't put yourself in a box. Don't think that, oh, don't label yourself as shy and just think, well, that'll never happen for me because I would never do something like that. It's not true. You can overcome those things, because I did, and I know
Yeah.
other people can too.
There's a book I read probably right after around the time I was out of college. It was a success principle book, and one of the
Hmm.
first chapters was all about just showing up. And it was kind of
Yes.
saying that they were like, honestly, probably half, if not more, of your journey to success is just showing up.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I would equate to what your, experiences have been is you've been showing up. You've
Yeah.
been doing this, you've been doing that, you've been doing that, and then you're accumulating the skills and the experience and the expertise as you've gone along. But half of it's just putting yourself out there, just showing up. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. My dad always said that too, is half the battle is just showing up, just show up.
Mhm. Yep. Love it. Couple more questions for you. You got some
Yeah,
time for a few more?
I do, absolutely.
So, for someone aspiring to a leadership position, okay, so obviously
Hmm.
you've worked your way up to now, like we were joking earlier, you're the boss, you call the shots, right? You're the one who has to be that decision maker end of the day. What skills and experiences should people focus on for leadership? It doesn't have to be specifically to your field in marketing, but just kind of generally as a question regarding just aspiring leaders.
Sure. So I think one of there are so many, but I think one of
Sure.
the most important attributes of a leader is somebody who can listen, somebody who knows what they don't know, and they're willing to learn from people who do know. And I know with it, when you are a leader at the company, you're typically not, or on a team, you're typically not, you don't know everything. You hire specialists underneath you to then inform you of certain things, and then you make a decision based on that. So I think knowing how to listen to people and knowing what to listen to is very important. And specific to marketing, I think one of the most important attributes to have is that data-driven decision making. In our world today, there's so much data out there, so it's not necessarily a matter of having data. It's knowing what to do with that information. I think that is really important, knowing where to look and what's important and what's not, what noise needs to be shut off, what you need to be listening to more closely. Um, and another thing I've learned too throughout my career is that everything's a group project. I feel like that's not emphasized enough in school. In school, you're always doing stuff on your own, with the occasional group project. But no, when you're in the workforce, you have to collaborate with everybody at all times. Like you are never doing anything in a vacuum. So I think the ability to work well with others and collaborate is also super important.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. It sounds like a lot of what leadership is figuring out how to work with people.
Yeah.
Your
Yep.
point about willingness to listen, being able to work with people below you who you don't know everything, so you don't want to act like you know everything, right?
Yeah.
Um, Data-driven decision making, that's a tough one too.
Yeah.
That's not so much the people end of it, but that's definitely takes a lot of self-reflection and slowing down maybe some of
Hmm.
your processes for just rushing things through, right?
Exactly. And not just, going by, well, this is what we've always done, so we should always do it that way. No, you need to look at what the data is telling you and know
Yeah,
which data to be looking at. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing this all because
Hmm.
that's all really crucial stuff. Um, all right. So last question for you for the podcast.
Yes.
Before we jump into this one, I do want to say this has been awesome. You reflected on your career, so
Oh,
thank
thank
you for
you.
taking the time to share this all with us.
Of
Um,
course.
so this is a kind of little bonus question I give to all the alumni who come on as a guest. It's a fun kind of end of the episode question to ask. But um, so if you could go back in time and go speak to yourself as a student when you were at Villa, what advice would you give yourself during those years?
It's a very good question. I would say to not worry so much. I would still tell that to myself. And enjoy yourself and enjoy the process. I think oftentimes I was really focused on the next thing and put a lot of pressure on outcomes as opposed to focusing on the journeys. So I think I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older. But when I was in high school, it's definitely something that I could have heard. So that's the advice I would give myself. And also, I go circling back, I've said this throughout the podcast. It's okay to seem like you're trying. I think especially in high school, it was cool to seem, like you don't care, like you just whatever, but no, it's okay to seem like you are trying.
That was a cool thing to do, though, when you act like you
Was
don't
it?
try.
I know. And I think people do it because then if they fail, they can tell themselves, well, I didn't try, so that's why. But I think one reason why I've achieved what I have is because I've been open that yes, I'm trying, yes, I want this. And I know I'm not going to get it right every time and it might look silly, but that's not going to stop me.
Yeah, I would say nail on the head. I think the idea of being embarrassed, right? To
Yes.
if you were actually showing you tried and you failed in front of your peers,
Hmm.
that fear of being embarrassed, I think, holds people back from then
Yeah,
acting like, yeah, I am trying at this. I am working hard. I do want to achieve this. I do want to accomplish this. So, yeah, that's awesome. No, that's always a fun question to ask people because I think when we think back on our lives, those are some good perspective, things that we've learned through our careers, and it kind of helps, summarize a few of those lessons that we've learned.
absolutely. And now it has me thinking, okay, in 10 years, then if someone asked me, what would you tell your 32-year-old self? Now I'm like, okay, what should I be doing now? Yeah,
That's a good
exactly.
question, actually. I'm going to
Yeah.
reflect on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been so much fun, Paige.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, Jimmy. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's been so much fun. I really enjoy hearing your stories from your time at Villa, talking about your career. I know a lot of our listeners will get a lot of value out of hearing, what you've had to share with us today. And this is one of those episodes I'm going to listen to once I put it out there as well. I always
Thanks.
enjoy listening back on these to catch up on things that, I missed the first time as we're talking. So, no,
Yeah,
thank you for taking the time and recording this with me.
of course. And you're a great interviewer, Jimmy. I was thinking that throughout our conversation. You're very good at what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paige. I appreciate
Of
it.
course.